everyone. Great to see some familiar faces here, some new faces. I'm Saro, McKenna. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dacoco. We are the creators of Alien Worlds, which is the most played blockchain game. It's a great honor to have these panelists today. So we have Zack, Gall from the ENF. We have Danny Brown-Wolf from Upland, Colin from the Telos Foundation, and Anton Umnov from Helika Analytics. So I'd like to just kick off by asking each of you just to introduce yourselves and sort of your connection with blockchain gaming, and then we'll talk about transparency in blockchain gaming, some of the new interoperability things that have been coming in, and user acquisition, and some other things for 25 minutes or so. Anton, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, thanks for invite. So Anton, leading the Helika team, we specialize in the blockchain analytics specifically for the gaming space. So we've been part of VGA for the last couple months actually. And so we're focusing on providing various analytics, including the segmentation and a lot of different things, mostly in US and in the Asian markets.
My name is Zack. I'm a co-founder and the CCO of the EOS Network Foundation. We are a grassroots foundation born out of the EOS community. The EOS chain launched in 2018. Our foundation launched in 2021. Since then, we've been heads down, reinvigorating the ecosystem. And over the last year, we made the strategic decision to focus on making EOS the preferred chain for blockchain gaming and GameFi. We're part of the Blockchain Gaming Alliance. And I will keep this short because you guys probably came here to network and drink and pass it on.
Hi, Danny Brown-Wolf. I'm Chief of Staff at Upland. Upland is the largest metaverse in Web3. We have over 300,000 unique landowners, and we are on EOS because it was the only chain capable of doing all the transactions that we needed for GameFi.
Hey everybody, I'm Colin O'Brien. I am the head of GameFi for the Telos Foundation, brought on to do strategy for ecosystem growth. I've been a gamer my entire life and I love blockchain tech, so this is absolutely a dream come true for me to be sitting here with all you wonderful folks.
Great, thank you. All right, so how about we just start off with some basics. So essentially, how does a blockchain construction sort of confer transparency? What does that give to users? Why are we even having a conversation about blockchain gaming in the first place? Why is that a valuable thing? I'll kick off with Colin.
Yeah, so I mean, blockchain technology itself logs all past transactions and does so through consensus mechanisms, right? So you're able to, as a user, go back and look at all of those transactions for complete transparency, and that enables a level of trust and security that you don't get in traditional Web 2. You're relying on a bunch of middlemen and third parties to provide that for you. This enables that trustless environment and really affords true ownership of the data for the individual users to be able to look at the networks and see what's taking place. Nothing's obfuscated.
Yeah, I'll double down on that. Not only ownership of data, but ownership of assets. Because if you think of gaming in general, why would we do Web3 gaming? What's the added value in Web3 as opposed to Web 2? And the clearest value proposition is true ownership of assets. So you as a user own your assets, not the platform itself. That's the number one thing that makes a difference. The transparency is also part of the Web3, I would say, ethos and also the value proposition because it allows a different relationship and accountability of the platform with the community. So our users know everything before we announce it. And it's very clear to us that everything that we do, every change that we make, every announcement that we make, they see it on the blockchain sometimes with tools that they've developed themselves in order to know what's going on. And that relationship of accountability is really one of the promises of Web3 and the difference that we're going to make in this ecosystem.
On top of the digital ownership and the true ownership of assets, like everyone else discussed, the other superpower of the blockchain, a blockchain, is smart contracts. So part of the blockchain, a smart contract is basically a deterministic way to put the logic into a contract of the rules of engagement, essentially. So a good example in gaming could be like a random number generator. You could use an open random number generator and know that everything is valid. I know that how the materials were sourced, and other projects within the same ecosystem could use those same tools, and everyone knows that they follow the same rules because it's enforced by a smart contract. There's a lot of other ways that can be leveraged, but you guys pretty much covered all of the bases, so I don't really have much to add.
Yeah, totally agree with what you guys are saying. I think also thinking about the game development and analytics themselves, transparency really allows for the publishers, for the builders to build actually a better product, because you can have visibility for competitive games, what kind of features in-game events are working the best. So ultimately, consumers are winning.
The consumers do win. So when we kind of had a pre-call last week about some of these topics, as much as transparency is a benefit to users and to blockchain gaming, it is also the user really wins in this, because it's very competitive, because the openness of it allows your competitors to also see your end users. It could see who your top whales are, your top buyers, your most influential users, and it allows them to kind of almost make vampire-like attacks to steal your end users. So at the end of the day, the end users do win, but it brings inherent changes and struggles for game companies to adapt.
Yeah, so that kind of centering the user is a consequence of the open architecture that blockchain applications tend to be comprised of, and the fact that the user is interacting with the smart contracts with their own account. They can take that account between dApps. That's something that OMA 3 has sort of really been emphasizing, and even definitionally in many of sort of the goals and aims of it. OMA 3 is the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3, of whom at least 3 members of this panel are members. The ENF is part of it as well.
Did we join yet?
Perhaps not. Okay.
Yeah, I learned a lot about it
It's
from
in process.
Anton from Upland.
Right, exactly. So, Danny, then to you, with that sort of, you're at the cold phase then of users all the time, right? Interacting with users, proposing these new features to users, hearing their feedback, then building things. Does the blockchain construction get in the way of that? Is it entirely understood by them? Like the pros and cons of that with respect to users?
Yeah, so Upland is unique in that we've developed a lot of proprietary technology on the EOS network in order for it not to matter to users if they don't want it. So users have the choice. You could always look at the blockchain data and see for yourself that no one's cheating, or actually when other users are cheating, we actually have our other users become detectives for us. And we have like a hot tip line, and half of our fraud is being caught by our users before we even get to it. That's pretty incredible. But from the user experience, we still need to consider, 60% of Upland's users are non-coiners. Upland is the first NFT that they've ever owned. They were onboarded in a complete Web 2 single sign-in type of way, and that's part of our strategy. However, it's not only the users. I would take it a step further and say that the other developers that are building as a second layer onto Upland, the data is super important to them. That's actually something Anton mentioned on our pre-call, and I thought was fascinating, because our in Upland, developers can connect to Upland and use it as a launch pad for their different meta spaces or games. They can use our ecosystem, connect to our wallets via onboarding, and of course, connect to our user base. And the competitive advantage for them to be able to do this on Web3 as opposed to Roblox is exactly what Anton said, that okay, they can actually see what works. They can see Upland is mapped to the real world, so they can see where users hang out. They can see what they do and build their games accordingly, which is access that game developers never had.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just to add to this one, I think in Web 2, it was impossible to understand who your users are, players are, before you actually launch a game, before you onboard somebody. Web 3 gives you the opportunity to have standardized segmentation of the players right off the bat before you even start user acquisition journey.
Maybe you could speak more on that. Standardized data is something that can be a little hard, actually, with respect to fully understanding dApps. So we've got a lot of on-chain data, but that's not the only data that matters. And standardizing that across different dApps can be a challenge. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So I mean, for us, we focus obviously on the on-chain data and social media, but our biggest value prop is that all the gaming studios will be sending to us their in-game data, what's happening to the players inside the game, how long they play, who they are, because not all of the gameplay is done on-chain essentially. And so to be able to accurately understand who your consumers are, who your audience is, you have to combine both data sets together, and that's what we're working on. I would say actually on-chain, importance of the on-chain data is probably 20% important, but it's actually 80% what's happening in custodian wallets or just in the gameplay.
It's a combo of on-chain data from public permissionless chains and off-chain data that's proprietary. And are there any examples of how sort of your clients or people in the market that you can see are using that specifically for user acquisition?
Yeah, I think user acquisition is huge. I would say before FTX days, I guess it was half a year ago, people had this idea of, and it's still the case, of collaboration, but at the end of the day, it's a B2C product. So you're competing for the end customer, whether it's their time, money, etc. And so right now, many gaming studios are focusing on competitive user acquisition through Web3 targeting. So essentially, you can create lookalike audiences. You can see which other games your players are engaging today and target them with different tools. And the cost of acquisition goes down materially.
Colin, I'd love to open up a conversation around, well, Danny, you referenced it, sort of spam. Fraud is maybe a strong term. Sometimes it's just contravening terms and conditions, but essentially civil attacks and that type of activity with large on-chain DApps. How are you guys thinking about that at Telos, and what are you seeing working?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept because I think blockchain technology is perfect for combating this problem. And if any of you out there are gamers, you know that cheating and fraud and manipulation can be detrimental to a gaming community. It can be detrimental to an IP. So things like identifying cheaters and issuing soul-bound tokens to people who are participating in malfeasance, bad actors, and taking those soul-bound tokens and basically flagging a user. And this is something that I personally would like to see widely adopted, and it's actually something I was talking to Chris Barnes. He's one of our elected guardians of Telos Foundation, and it's an interesting concept to be able to have decentralized governance as a service. And I think if you're able to pool enough developers and publishers together in the industry and utilize these soulbound tokens to flag bad actors, you can deter cheating across multiple games, across multiple platforms. And I mean, any true gamer is going to find that to be detrimental. You spend a lot of money and a lot of time building up a reputation on an account, building up items in a game. And if you're able to, as a developer, to push these soulbound tokens onto a particular wallet, and again, flag it for malfeasance, then I think you're going to deter a lot of bad actors in the space. So it's one of the things that I'm very excited about, because as a gamer, there's nothing worse than losing a match because you know the guy on the other side was cheating.
When soulbound tokens on EOS?
You can already do them. I mean, on most chains, the issue with soulbound token in general with fraud is the identity aspect to it. So it's really easy to create a new account if all accounts are anonymous.
True.
Which is why a lot of games, especially if they have fiat rails, they have the KYC of their end users that are extracting the most value from the ecosystem. But identity is a huge component that I think still needs to be resolved. Soulbound tokens can play a part of it, but I don't think it's something that we necessarily have the best optimal solution for yet.
We've seen we don't have soulbound tokens yet on the chain, but we use positive reinforcement, like badges for these detectives or for different levels. And we've seen that that's actually very helpful and allows you to also assess like good players.
Yeah.
Just make them non-transferable. They're soulbound.
I think that's what it is, right? It's just a non-transferable entity.
Yeah.
Zach, I mean, every time, so at Alien Worlds we invest a huge amount of time in this exact problem, right? This is one of the hard problems of crypto, is how do you still have highly scaled applications, low user costs, transactional costs, and low onboarding, but still have the right people interacting with your application and non-rent-seeking behavior, essentially. What do you see as being the kind? So, I mean, your GameFi has been identified for you guys as an area of growth. This is good for low cross-chain like EOS, that's going to be a big issue. How are you guys thinking about that?
So your identity is the sum of multiple parts. So one easy way to flag bots is they only interact with one thing, they do one specific thing, you can kind of identify that. There's other systems to tie that in. We have a grant system called Pomelo, for example, and it uses quadratic funding very similar to Gitcoin on Ethereum. And what they did was they built a trust score bonus where you're more trustworthy the more pieces of your identity that you put on the blockchain. So if you had your Google account, you're a little bit more trustworthy. You had a Twitter account, you're a little more trustworthy. A LinkedIn account. If you've interacted with certain contracts over a certain period of time, you're more trustworthy. So I think it's really coming up with a standard, and the standard might be different for each chain depending on what they're built on. So Telos, Upland, and EOS could probably benefit from the same tools. But for example, if it's like Solana or Polkadot or some other system, like they'd have to build their own because it's just different APIs, different on-chain information.
Yeah, also just to add on identity, I think many gaming studios in Asia in particular, they almost introducing the FICO scores based on, because we're tracking all the activity on chain across different chains, EOS and other ones as well. So if you know, if they're trying to give some kind of loan or in-game reward, you can almost see what's the probability that this player will flip or do something bad.
I think there's also much to be said about game design, because at the end of the day, this is crypto, and a lot of our users will choose to stay anonymous and not add parts of their life onto the chain, and we need to respect that. And the good game developers will not have incentives that these rent-seeking behavior will attract to the game in the first place.
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about the world beyond blockchain gaming and traditional gaming, Web 2, and how it's been preceding blockchain gaming. That's been a bit of a rocky road. I think initially the reception was relatively positive, and that has sort of hardened a little bit. And I've been sensing a slight softening actually in the last few months towards that. Post GDC, I don't know what you guys, I think Danny and Anton, you were both at GDC. Do you have any
I think we all.
We all are, yeah. We all hung out
Over here again.
Well, when we went to GDC, it felt like half of the GDC is literally about Web3 this year. I mean, it was double size of the last year, and it feels also that many of the companies just really building the games now. They don't really worry about the tech, but they again building B2C engaging consumer products where blockchain can be part of it, can be fully on chain, could be off chain. But I think even more traditional studios, they now at least experimenting with it. Even I'm hearing that Zynga now have the blockchain team and they're exploring it.
No, I saw the same thing. It was very polarizing at GDC. So you have, in one camp, they absolutely hate Web3. There's nothing you could do about it. And like you said, I wouldn't even give it 50-50. I'd say it's 70-30, 70% haters, 30% like dipping their toes in. But that's a significant increase from a year or two ago where I would say it's probably 10% or less.
And I think the more we build different use cases that actually help game developers using blockchain technology, even without the value proposition that we see, such as NFTs, they'll start understanding it more. And I'm very happy that Guidici, for example, have a new platform called Astra that they are offering regular game developers different Web3 or blockchain-based back-end products that help them manage their game better. And I think once that becomes more and more of a standard, then we'll see a bigger softening. And I think one of the projects that we're working on actually has to do with standardization of assets and allowing different game companies to monetize assets that they've already created and create royalty fees. So the concept for them of, okay, I already created and I worked very hard on creating these assets. Not only am I now allowing my user to take it somewhere else and enjoy it more, but I actually now make infinite royalty on it every time that it's being sold. Boom.
Yeah, having talked to a number of game studios in the last 6 months, the biggest problem that we've identified is friction. friction of getting into the space. And there's two sides to that coin. You have developers and you have the gamers themselves. And working on getting the infrastructure in place to make it easy for game developers who don't have any knowledge of Web3 or Solidity or smart contracts or NFTs to be able to have no-code solutions for them so they can get in, they can make the games they need to make, and then also onboard the gamers themselves. The current system with wallet generation and everything involved on the user end is just way too complicated for the masses right now. We're not going to hit mass adoption until we remove that friction. And so that's what I've been hearing from a lot of developers is they want those tools, and a lot of people are building those tools right now. And that's what we're working on building up over at Telos is the tooling to make it easy for users and developers to get into the space as quickly and easily as possible. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. It needs to be no different than a Web2 gaming experience today.
Sounds brilliant.
And if I may add,
I was almost gonna hype you guys up.
we kind of need to share. So Upland has built APIs that any game developer doesn't need to do any of the blockchain stuff, but is automatically connected to the EOS blockchain and our ecosystem through our APIs, and they can focus on what they do best, which is game development. And we're co-hosting a hackathon in June, and there's still a couple of weeks for. You're judging, right? Are you coming to judge?
I'm on vacation.
Oh no, okay. Someone from the EOS Foundation will come to judge it. It's a great opportunity to see. Okay, we have assets that were already created. You can create your own assets, but you don't need to. As a developer, you don't need to do the wallets, the blockchain, the integration, the smart contracts. You just do what you do. You create the cool gaming loops and connect it. So we're very excited to see what people come up with.
Great, cool. We'll be looking out for the hackathon in June. So I wanted to touch upon, we have, I think, a mix of people in the room, some of whom are, closer to the sort of Antelope community, some of whom are a little bit, from the BGA or have found this through other means. But I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on some of the great work that you guys have done in the last couple of weeks in bringing the EVM to EOS. How do you feel that the future, where does that take gaming applications and being able to deploy onto an Antelope chain? How does that expand the horizons, expand liquidity, expand the markets that they can attract? And what was the rationale for that?
So the current Web3 space as it stands today, 90% of it is Solidity based. So you need to meet developers where they're at. But I see there's a much bigger market of Web2 gaming studios that are looking to dip their toes into Web3. So in my opinion, it's not that EOS EVM is a short-term thing. It's short and long-term, but to get the quick wins of like what Web3 is today, it opens those doors that were previously closed. So it's kind of like you never want to close doors. You want to be open to everyone. But long term, I think that there's a lot of superpowers that come with the Antelope technology that Upland's been leveraging. They built the tools on their own before like the chain itself even allowed them to use it. Things that are being replicated on EVM-based chains, they're just being done differently. Things like covering gas or resource costs for your end users. It's complicated enough that you're asking your end users to, okay, here's this thing called an NFT. Oh, and we also have this game token. And on top of this game token, you also need this thing called Ether to power your transactions. It's too much. And you can eliminate just one of those by not requiring the gas fees. And you work, and they're called meta transactions on an EVM. On Antelope chains, it's just a native functionality of third parties being able to cover resource costs. But it comes down to what Colin says. You just need to remove the friction from the end users, from developers, from the node operators. You remove friction from all of those layers because it's still way too complicated right now.
Well, congrats on that, and I think it's super exciting that the EVM world is being opened up to the Antelope chains. All right, you guys, it was so nice to see everybody. Thank you so much to the panel, and we'll be here with all of you in the next few minutes.